Today is October the 9th, 2020, and today we're here with Scott Brumley, the County Attorney for Potter County. Scott, thanks for coming by.
Thank you for having me.
Why don't you tell the voters who you are?
Sure. Again, my name is Scott Brumley. I was born in Lubbock, Texas. Please don't hold that against me. My parents were teachers. My dad went on to get his PhD in range and wildlife management at Texas Tech, and he taught down there for a while in the range and wildlife management program, specializing in prescribed burning, which made for an interesting childhood. I spent a lot of my time out in a smoky smelling vehicle burning fire lines and that kind of thing. I lived for a while in Houston with my family when I was a child. We managed to escape and then go on down to the Rio Grande Valley, which is where my father was from. We lived down there for a short time and then moved back up to Lubbock, which is where I went to school. I went to undergraduate. I did my undergraduate work at Texas Tech. I was a journalism major. During that time, I was editor, I was a reporter initially, then the news editor, and then the editor-in-chief of the University Daily, which is now called the Daily Toreador, which is the daily newspaper at Texas Tech. And worked for a short time while I was down there also at the Lubbock Avalanche Journal as a reporter. Because of the work that reporters do and watching current events, and in particular events in the courts as well as political events that were occurring, that piqued my interest, and I thought that law school was probably a logical postgraduate pursuit to undertake. So I went to law school at Texas Tech, graduated in 1992 and took the bar, worked for a time in a law firm down in Lubbock, a small law firm, and then hung a shingle and did a solo practice down there, doing criminal defense, civil litigation, family law, kind of covering the waterfront. In 1995, some friends of mine who, tried to remain in contact with friends of mine from law school, and some of them were working up here in Amarillo, and one of them contacted me and let me know that the county attorney's office was looking for someone to come do civil litigation, to represent the county in lawsuits, to try and ease the financial burden on the county of having to pay outside lawyers to come in and represent the county on lawsuits. And not just the county, but also individual officers who get sued. When you have a sheriff's department and you have a fairly sizable jail like Potter County does, you field your fair share of lawsuits. So I came up and interviewed for that, and it went well, and I was hired by my predecessor, Sonia Letson, to come up and be the chief of the civil division in the county attorney's office. That was in 1995. I served in that capacity for about 10 years, and as she got close to the end of her term, at the end of 2004, Sonia decided she wasn't going to run again, and she talked to me about running, and I decided I would go ahead and run. The office was a good organization, as it continues to be, and working with good people, and I was enjoying what I was doing, and so I decided to run, and in the first election ran unopposed, was elected county attorney, took office on January 1st of 2005. Since then, I've served as county attorney for 15 years. This is the first time in the time I've served as county attorney that I've had a general election opponent. I had a primary opponent in the last election cycle, but this time I've got a general election opponent. That's where I've come from, and I've enjoyed, there are days that aren't so enjoyable, but by and large, I have truly enjoyed what I've done, and I really enjoy the people that I work with, both in the county attorney's office, as well as the folks who work in the justice system throughout Potter County. And so I'm hopeful that the election goes well and that I can continue to serve the folks in Potter County as the county attorney.
So, all right, So do you think a lot of the reasons for the need for all these public defender or other attorneys, is that coming from the homeless population?
There are certainly I think the homeless would be a substantial driver there. Obviously, those folks are not going to have the resources to retain a lawyer, and they. I don't think it would be accurate to say that the homeless are predisposed to commit criminal acts, but we see. I don't have statistics to quote you, but I can tell you anecdotally, we see plenty of cases involving homeless folks. And in particular, in misdemeanor cases, we see things like criminal trespass.
Right.
And sometimes criminal mischief, which is damaging property, up to, and of course there's a separate offense for graffiti, but same concept. And you know, when we're dealing with folks like that, one of the issues that we see, and I think it's pretty acute with the homeless population, is mental illness, and we really don't have much in the way of resources to deal with the mentally ill, other than them winding up in the jail, which is, all things considered, a pretty expensive way to treat mental illness, as well as the unfortunate possibility that they bring with them, which is, of course, in the current situation, there's always the possibility they're going to bring COVID-19 into the jail, which the sheriff's done a really good job of keeping the virus out of the jail to a large extent. But there's always a possibility every time anybody's arrested and brought into the jail that they're going to come in with COVID-19. But more broadly, when a population that has a fairly high instance of mental illness is one of your recurring groups that you see a lot of, or produces a lot of people that you see in the jail, there's always the potential for liability if they commit suicide, if they injure another inmate, if they get into a scuffle with the guards. There's all of those types of possibilities for liability. So to the extent we could get them treated somewhere besides the jail, that would be a good thing, but we don't have a lot of resources. Of course, the pavilion is a resource, but the pavilion generally won't see patients if they are carrying criminal charges.
Well, I guess the last Democrat governor that we had is responsible for putting all these people on the street.
Yeah, yes. Our state system of providing services for the mentally ill has been, since that time, inadequate, would be a charitable way to put it. I do applaud Representative Price for trying to address that situation and passing some important legislation. And I think he's trying to move the ball in the direction that we can take those people who are committing crimes largely. It's difficult to say if they're committing crimes because they're mentally ill, but often are failing to recognize what most of us recognize in terms of what the law limits us or prohibits us from doing, and get those people into whatever help they need, whatever therapy they need, so that they can, number one, not commit crimes, and number two, try to get them back to being productive citizens that make this a prosperous place to live, which is why most of us live here. It's a good place to live. It's a good place to raise a family.
Well, it seems to me that maybe we're figure out what's causing the problem
Sure.
and fix that, and then you don't have the burden on your office having to deal with them.
Certainly, as well as the police. We shouldn't lose sight of the fact that we, I think, unfairly burden the police with being essentially mental health first responders when they're getting more and better training about that. But I think it's unfair to them, and our system, the criminal justice system, is engineered to hold people responsible for bad decisions and bad behavior. And when you're talking about mentally ill people, they don't necessarily recognize the same kind of constraints that a normal, mentally relatively healthy person recognizes. A lot of times they don't understand what they're doing is breaking the law, in other words.
Yeah, they're not responsible.
Right. And we should be dealing with those people outside. It's asking the criminal justice system to do something that it's not designed to do. And that's a problem. And the big problem is it's expensive.
So do you remember the governor's logic when she shut down
The stated logic was that more and better resources were available in the community if mentally ill persons weren't institutionalized, if they weren't being treated on an inpatient basis, but rather released into the community, that would be more financially efficient and they would get better service. It turns out that both of those assumptions were wrong.
So maybe we need to revisit that.
I think so. I think that there are certainly, that's not to say that there are not folks who benefit from outpatient mental health services. There are plenty of those folks, but there are also a lot of people who are suffering serious mental illness who need inpatient hospitalization, just like somebody who has a heart attack needs inpatient hospitalization to stabilize the condition such that it can be treated down the road on an outpatient basis.
So trespassing, is that a state crime?
Yes, that's a crime under the penal code. It's Class B misdemeanor.
Would it, because years ago my wife and I worked on this homeless issue and gave some recommendations, and the city took a lot of them up, and I think and they worked, and we cleaned up a lot of areas, but they didn't quite do all of them. And one of the big things that we discovered that really benefited communities was taking trespassing and make that a lower crime. And if you could do that, then that doesn't burden your office, and they simply get a ticket.
Right.
Whether it's $40 or $70, and then if they don't pay that ticket, then there's a warrant for them.
Sure.
And that did wonders in the communities that tried that. Have y'all ever considered about doing
We
something
have.
like that here?
There is, of course, there's a provision in state law that allows the police, in some misdemeanor cases, to do what's known as cite and release. And once we get the case, we can then look at it and try to design an outcome within the boundaries of the law where somebody is treated largely like what you're describing, that it's treated more like a ticket. But unfortunately, criminal trespass is not among the offenses that's available for. So as it stands, to do that on a broad-based basis, we would probably need a change in law, and that's probably one that's overdue. I think criminal trespass is a difficult. It's a trick. I shouldn't say difficult. It's a tricky situation because, of course, we recognize in the United States and certainly in Texas the primacy of the right to enjoy your personal your property, your private property, and when other people intrude upon that, we've accepted for a long time the law should provide some sort of remedy. And so to flesh that out, we have a lot of retailers in town where folks will hang around their stores and they cause problems. They cause disturbances, they frighten customers, and those folks need some avenue to get folks to leave who won't leave on their own accord. I think as a neighborhood matter, your idea is a sound one. I think a lot of businesses would be maybe reluctant to have it be a ticket issue because I think their view would be these people aren't ever going to leave. They're going to stack up a bunch of tickets, and they're not going to pay them, and so eventually they'll go to jail for a while, and then they'll be right back here. Now, a lot of the folks who wind up right back at the business, even after they're arrested for criminal trespass, do have some mental health issues, and so we come full circle to what we were talking about before.
Well, you could make it the property owner could make that decision whether
Sure.
you want to just ticket him or do you want to prosecute him.
Sure, sure. And really, I'm not even disagreeing with you. What I'm saying is, I think the legislature could stand to give us more tools to deal with that. I agree. I think maybe criminal trespass, much like theft and other offenses, could be one of those that you step up in severity the more you commit the offense. As it stands right now, a criminal trespass is a criminal trespass is a criminal trespass. It's all Class B misdemeanor. And so folks go out there to the jail. If they're convicted, the maximum time they can spend in jail is 180 days. Most judges and juries are really pretty unwilling to give people a full 6 months in jail for failing to leave when they were told to. And so I think maybe if there was a step up in the severity, a lot of folks just don't get the message. It's not okay to keep going back to somebody's property when they tell you to leave.
Well, that's because they're not being penalized.
That's correct.
But maybe that's something we need to get to the legislature.
I would certainly agree with that kind of.
Because if you look at cities that are well run, they really focus on the small crimes.
Sure.
If you eliminate the small crimes, or you make it to where they don't want to commit those small crimes, big crimes don't happen.
Right.
So it's being very forceful on the minor stuff, and they get the message real quick, and they go to the next town or straighten up.
Mm-hmm. That's the essence of the broken windows theory of policing and prosecution. Focus on, because, and the idea, the reason it's called broken windows is that a community that has a bunch of broken windows and a bunch of graffiti and vandalism indicates a willingness to tolerate criminality.
That's right.
And I think broken windows has gotten a bad rap in the current, whatever you would call our cultural moment we're having now. Because I agree with you. I think a community that focuses on small, what we now call low-level offenses, is a community that sends the message that, look, we're all about welcoming people to our community. We're all about embracing the whole community. We're all about helping our neighbors, but we don't tolerate criminal conduct.
Right. Yeah, it's crimes against property instead of crimes against people.
Right.
But they're both related.
That's correct.
In the end, and if you allow crimes against property, it's not going to be long, and they're going to be committing crimes against people.
That's right. People's minds are very susceptible, I think, to a slippery slope.
Yeah, they're going to push and see what they can get by with.
Sure.
It's human nature.
Right.
Yeah. So if they know, well, it's like a strict teacher or a strict parent. If the kid knows he can't get by with it, he's going to be good.
That's correct.
But if he thinks he can finagle around and make something happen
Right.
and get attention,
Yeah.
he's going to do it.
Yeah, and that brings up a good point that I probably should clarify where I'm coming from on too. When I talk about mentally ill people, most of the people we deal with are not mentally ill. And those are the people who need to be refocused, I guess we could say, on the idea that it's not okay to commit crimes, because they have the capability to understand that. Some folks who suffer mental illnesses may not have that capability, and we need to help those folks.
Right.
But yeah, the average defendant who isn't suffering from a mental illness, I believe falls into President Reagan's wisdom that we have to reject the idea that when a crime is committed, society is to blame instead of the offender. That personal responsibility is a critical part of the liberty we all want to enjoy as Americans.
Yeah, you can't have liberty without responsibility.
Right.
And that's what, part of what's going on in these big cities is they've lost that, but it's indoctrinated into them from, really, we've failed our youth with our education system. We've allowed the kids to be brainwashed, really, and taught things that are not so.
Yes, we've moved away through, in part through negligence and in part through some curricula that are really kind of indoctrination oriented, that there is nothing exceptional about America, that the ideals that the Republic rests on are antiquated, and really what that leads to is an idea that the only thing that's right is if I get what I want. And that, of course, is a recipe for, while still claiming, I have my rights, I have my liberty. But as you point out, liberty without responsibility is anarchy, and that's what we're seeing.
Yep. Well, and it's just a whole philosophy that, of course, I get people saying I'm hateful when I say it, but it's true. So I say it anyway. But, the Democratic Party is a philosophy of theft. And they repeat it over and over and over, and they call it redistribution.
Mm-hmm.
Fairness.
Mm-hmm.
There's no such thing as fairness.
Yeah.
So they believe that taking from one and giving to another is reasonable, but that's against every natural law that there is.
Mm-hmm.
And so these people grow up believing it.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds good.
Sure.
I mean, we want redistribution of income.
Yeah.
Well, that means I go into your house because you have 7 TVs and I only have 2, so I get to take 2 of yours.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you would shoot them.
Right.
And
Right.
you should.
Right.
But if they do it through the government, it's
Mm-hmm.
okay.
And when you let the government do that,
Yeah.
the slippery slope is pretty soon the government can come in and take all 17.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking earlier today. I was talking to somebody in my office, and I said, well, what we need to do is have a separation of, we have separation of church and state.
Mm-hmm.
We need to have a separation of economics and state.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you get the government involved in economics, all kinds of bad things start happening.
It gums up the machinery of a well-functioning free market.
Yeah, you do away with the free market.
Right.
You skew it, and then pretty soon it's gone.
Yeah.
Pretty soon you have an oligarchy.
Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, in this day and age, we don't have enough people who can effectively communicate the fact that free markets create more prosperity, more wealth, more ability to rise up out of poverty than any other system. And that socialism systems, any system based on the Marxist idea of from each according to his ability to each according to his need, is going to essentially suppress the majority of the population and allow that few that are, we're all equal, but some are more equal than others. Kind of the Orwellian idea of how you get to a leadership position in that kind of authoritarian government and society. That the general idea is, yes, we're all equal now. We're all equally miserable.
Exactly. Well, they've tried it many, many times. Well, they tried it when they first came to America. And Bradford said, this isn't working. We're all going to starve to death.
Right.
So he gave everybody a plot of land and let them trade among themselves. And everything flourished. People were successful, and that's where Thanksgiving came from, which will be here in another month.
Yes.
So, if people would just learn history,
Yes.
I think a lot of these ideas would disappear. The problem is they're trying to change it
Sure.
and wipe it out because they know capitalism works, but with capitalism, people who aren't willing to work won't have much power.
Right.
And it's all about power.
Sure it is.
Not about
Oh,
the
absolutely.
voters, not about the individual.
Right.
And that's why voting, to me, is so critical, because voting is the great equalizer.
Sure it is.
We all have one vote, and it doesn't matter who you are, whether you're the person in front of your court that committed a small Class B misdemeanor, or you're Donald Trump, or you're Warren Buffett, or anybody else, Jeff Bezos. That person in your court, as long as they're not a felon,
Right.
has the same power as that person with their vote.
That's correct.
And if people could just wrap their mind around that concept, I don't think there'd be anybody that wouldn't vote.
Right.
They need to be informed, and they need to vote.
Yep.
And I think if we could get, my goal is to try to get that message out to people so that they'll become informed and vote, because I trust people and I trust the voters. They will make the right decision. I always say the voters are 100 times smarter than the politicians.
Yep.
The politicians are just here today and gone tomorrow.
Right.
They don't matter. The voters
That's correct.
matter.
That's correct. In my line of work, we see the same thing with juries. Juries usually get it right,
Yep.
and you got to trust them.
Yep.
And that's one of the things that drew me to conservatism early on in the way when I was looking at my own philosophy, was the idea that we trust people to make decisions for themselves. So long as it doesn't violate the law or violate the rights of other people, then you should have that freedom. And with that freedom comes a responsibility.
Sure.
That's the whole idea of the natural rights with which we're imbued. Not only do we have those natural rights, but we're obligated to see to it that our own behavior doesn't infringe on the natural rights of others. And that's the big problem I see with progressivism. It's an attempt to cram down your own agenda down somebody else's throat, and that's eminently un-American and unappealing to me.
Yep. Well, it won't be long, and the voters are going to speak.
Yes,
So
they
let's
will.
just hope they vote.
That's
'Cause I
it.
trust them, but they need to get out and make a decision.
That's correct.
So if you're watching this and you haven't voted, please do so.
That's right. Early voting starts October 13th,
Yeah.
and the state has made it easier, particularly in light of the pandemic, to get out and vote, and have plenty of time to do it. So there should be adequate safeguards to meet your concerns about the virus, and so there really is no good excuse not to get out and vote.
Yeah. And, if you're over 65 or you have a medical condition, you can apply for a absentee ballot, which I think we have a really good, solid system here in the state of Texas. and people that are afraid of the virus, which I think is a horrible thing, because it's just a virus. You get it, you get over it, and you go on down the road. I've had it. Everybody in my office has had it. It's just a flu. You get over it.
Sure.
And then you've got the antibodies, and you don't have to worry about it anymore. But there's probably no cleaner place than a polling place. You have social distancing. You can wear a mask. You can the screen is sanitized between every vote. You can use a surgical glove to punch the screen.
Indeed, in Potter County, we're going to be handing out Q-tips to use as a stylus. So you don't even have to touch the screen.
That's true. We're going to do that. Or they can use a glove.
Sure.
So we have both available to them.
Yep.
So, I was on a PBS discussion about mail-in ballots. And I got to thinking, I said, because I got a deal from my daughter's school that said that virus can stay on paper anywhere from 3 hours to 10 days. They don't know.
Right.
Well, what could be dirtier than a mail-in ballot?
Sure.
Going through the mail you don't know where that ballot's been.
Right.
So to me, that could be the most toxic possible thing that we could do. They thought I was a lunatic, but I actually think it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. People just don't think.
No. We're so caught up as a society, and I'm speaking on a nationwide basis. I actually think that Amarillo and the Panhandle of Texas are sort of an island of sanity in a nation that's going through a psychotic break, I think, at this point in time. But we, as a nation, I'm troubled by the fact that I see so many people who don't look at facts, who don't look at reason, who don't look at rational arguments about any given issue. The only question is, does my side win?
Right. And they're basing their decisions on emotion.
Right.
And what they've done is I think they scared the politicians with this virus, which in turn scared the public. When to me, they should have said, hey, we have a nasty virus. It's a bad flu. Here's what we know. Here's what we think you should do. Do what you can to improve your immune system. We trust you to make a good decision that's best for you, and we trust business owners to do what they think's best for them. If you have any questions, here's the info. Call our office or go to our website, and we'll be happy to help you with any information we can. I think if they would have approached it that way at the state level, nobody would have any problem. We probably wouldn't even be talking about this.
It's largely how South Dakota approached it, and they've had good success, and they've also not shut down vast swaths of their industry.
Yeah, but we can't decide who's essential. Everybody's essential.
Sure.
If you're hungry, that restaurant's essential.
Sure. Sure. I mean, there. Trust me, I've heard every lawyer joke in the book.
Yeah, I could think of a whole lot of things I could say.
But okay, lawyers may not seem essential, just to use a personal example, but to my family, to the families of the lawyers working in our office and the lawyers working throughout Amarillo, their work is essential because they need to be bringing in the ability to sustain the family. And you're absolutely right. That's a bit of an artificial distinction that's been created by government action.
Yeah. Well, to me, every person is essential.
Sure.
The most essential is the guy driving the trash truck.
Sure.
The guy working at the sewer plant. The guy producing our water.
Right.
Nobody sees those people, but we don't say they're not essential.
Right.
We want them working so we can stay home.
Right. Right.
So everybody is essential.
Farmers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ranchers raising our beef.
Absolutely.
The truck drivers bringing
it in so we can
produce.
buy it. Yeah.
So, I mean, it just makes no sense to me that anybody could even think that they could make a decision determining that. It's just a slippery slope.
It is. I think there's legitimate concern about the erosion of our liberty in the face of how we've reacted to this, and seems to me the critical question to me is, what are we going to do to claw that liberty back, and can we?
Yeah, that's the question. Can we? But the best thing that the individuals can do is to show up and vote.
That's how, to the extent there is an ability to claw that liberty back, that's how it's going to happen.
But I always say it's the people that don't vote that decide the elections.
Absolutely.
So you better get out there and vote, because the bad people are getting in by good people not voting.
Right.
And we know that all the people out there have the ability to make a good decision, so go make it.
Absolutely.
And help save our country.
Absolutely.
And I think the reason we're probably an island of sanity in a sea of insanity is because the people of the Panhandle, by and large, do show up and vote. I mean, we're getting more voter participation here in the last couple of elections than anywhere in the state, percentage-wise.
Agreed. And that's encouraging.
That proves your point.
Mm-hmm.
So people just need to understand how important it is to be informed and vote.
That's correct.
But I don't ever tell anybody how they should vote.
No.
I get calls every day, who should I vote for? I say, I'm not going to tell you who to vote for, but I'll tell you where to go get the information.
Absolutely.
So you can
inform
make the decision.
yourself and make up your own mind.
Yep. Well, is there anything you want to tell the voters as to why they should choose you over your Democrat opponent?
Well, I think in the last few minutes we've covered the philosophical reasons pretty thoroughly. You know, I live in Amarillo, and I raised my family in Amarillo on purpose. And I do not choose to raise my family in Seattle or Portland or San Francisco or Austin, for that matter. And I would encourage folks to, again, educate themselves. But the plea I would make is, don't let Amarillo turn into those places where the policies, and I use that term pretty loosely, of the modern Democratic Party have taken once great cities and turned them into
slums.
Yes, right.
Yeah, I've told the Republican Party, if I was going to advise you on how to win the election, all you've got to do is take a picture of these cities in the 50s and 60s and when they were under Republican control, and show a picture of them today under Democrat control.
Mm-hmm.
That should tell people all they need to know.
Mm-hmm.
You can keep it real simple.
Yep.
But we just need people to make the effort to figure that out.
Sure.
You know.
Sure.
Do you have a website or anything?
I have a Facebook page. It's Scott Brumley, and we are. I'm happy to talk to folks. Come out and one of the great. I'll give an example. One of the great programs that I really enjoy that folks in the county do is the Sheriff's Citizens Academy. It's always it's always not only fun to go talk to those folks, but it's an encouragement to me, because those are folks who are taking the time. They're taking 3 to 4 hours every Tuesday evening to go out and learn about how their government works. Mm-hmm. And if we could see more of that, we would see people. Once people know how their government works, they take it gives them some ownership that they already have, but it makes them aware of that ownership, and and then they get out and vote, because that's how you exercise control over that government. And so any events people are having, I'm happy to come out and talk to them. It's been a strange year to campaign.
Yes.
And so I suppose we will see how that strangeness culminates on November 3rd. But meanwhile, I'm happy to, and this interview has been useful in that, and a useful illustration that a lot of people don't know what the county attorney's office does. And I'm happy to come out and talk about what we do. I'm also happy to bore people with my thoughts on government, but they may not want to hear that. But I'm happy to talk about what our office does and how it fits within the system of, if it works right, our system of ordered liberty.
Right. Right. Well, do you want to give the viewers your phone number?
Certainly.
Your office, in case they want to get
Certainly.
hold of you?
Our main office number is area code 806-379-2255, and that will get, then they can, some people may have questions that maybe in terms of what we are doing at any given point in time that maybe other people in our office can answer better than I can, and so that way we can route you to the right people. Most often it'll be to me, and that's fine. Also, we're on the 3rd floor of the Potter County Courthouse, and you'll have to go through screening, of course, and they'll take your temperature. But our office is open, and we're happy to have people come up and talk to us about what we do and what it is the county does, what our office does, what is going on in the county, and we're always happy to have folks come do that. That we saw a lot of that actually before the pandemic, and that was one of the reasons I've always liked about, or one of the things I've always liked about being in the kind of law practice I'm in now rather than in private practice, because I don't have to worry about billing for my time. I can take the time to talk to folks about problems they may be having, issues that they see that they're concerned about, and I don't have to worry about billing them for it. And so we're a resource. Now, of course, we can't just represent people who...
Yeah, you can't give people personal legal advice.
Right, but I can talk to them about the general state of the law and answer questions about the law. And we're always happy to do that. So we're certainly looking forward to hopefully continuing to do that for the folks in Potter County, and continuing to work to the code, toward what the Code of Criminal Procedure tells us, which is that a prosecutor's duty is not to convict, but to see that justice is done. And
Well, that's the way it ought to be. I think another problem and another big concern that we have to look at statewide is a lot of the the district attorneys, because the liberals are really making headway in getting these district attorneys that have no interest in what's right or wrong. They just want a conviction, or they won't prosecute.
Right.
Either way is wrong.
That's correct.
So we've got to be very vigilant.
That's correct. Justice almost never admits of a categorical. What I mean by that is, if you're really working to do justice, you are working at cross purposes if you tell people, I will never prosecute this case, or I will always prosecute this case. Cases rise and fall on their own facts. And then you apply the law to those facts. And the idea is that gets you as close to justice, true justice, as we are humanly capable of. And so I think anybody that tells you any absolute about, I'm not going to take this case, or I'm going to only do this on these cases, is selling you snake oil.
Yeah. Well, very good. I really appreciate you coming by and
I
enjoyed
appreciate the
conversation.
opportunity. I appreciate the opportunity
And,
to come in.
Good luck in the election.
Thank you. Get out and vote.